Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Shridath Ramphal Center's Lunchtime Chat. I am Vanessa Mason, and today I will be taking you through the chat today, and we will be joining a global celebration in terms of the United Nations Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprise Day 2026. Well, it is celebrated tomorrow, but we are doing it today, and today we're doing it forming part of an important discussion on medium, small, and micro enterprises, and we're looking at it from a youth lens. So we are aware of the importance of MSMEs. They represent about 90% of all businesses and employment globally. And here in Barbados, they make up approximately 98% of registered businesses, and they employ approximately 55% of the labor force. So they are very critical in terms of our economy. They're really the backdrop of our economy. And in terms of today's webinar, we will focus on something specific. What we're going to look at today is what trade actually looks like for a young Barbadian entrepreneur, not just in theory, but in practice. We're going to look at things such as supply chains, digital commerce, getting your products to a customer in other countries, as well as look at the wins and the frictions in terms of being an entrepreneur and looking to expand your business. Today, we have two incredible founders with us who are living that reality, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you. Firstly, I'm going to start with Tyrique Wilson, and he's the founder of Carringtons Rum Cream, and he is a Barbadian, and his rum cream is built on his grandfather's recipe, and it was launched based on a neighborhood in Carrington's village. Since December 2020, he has grown the brand into multiple flavors and is placed on many shelves throughout Barbados, and is even in the departure lounge at the Grantley Adams International Airport. So Tyrique, allow me to welcome you. We also have with us Blessing Olaniyi, and she's a Barbadian entrepreneur as well. She's a handbag designer as well as a sewing instructor. She's the founder of Ayola, and this is a handbag brand, known for its Caribbean-inspired designs that blend artistry, functionality, and cultural storytelling. She also runs Ayola Sewing Studio, where she teaches bag making and sewing aspiring creatives and entrepreneurs. So welcome to you as well, Blessing. Get straight into the discussion, and I'm going to begin with Tyrique. Now, you started this business in 2020, and for some, this would be seen as one of the most difficult periods in recent history, especially for any business in the middle of a pandemic. Can you tell us what trade, logistics, and barriers you faced in those early days and how you pushed through them?
Yeah, thank you for having me once again, and thank you for the question. So as you mentioned, Carrington's Rum Cream really started from my grandfather's recipe. So it was literally built out of my home. So I took his recipe, made it into a business, made a coconut version, since made a chocolate butterscotch version, as said on the name, Carrington's Rum Cream, named it after Carrington Village. But then I think that time was on our side. So the war had come to a stop really. And I said to myself at that point in time, now is the time for me to start laying the stepping stones in terms of doing something that can survive me and that can be around even after I die. And it was difficult. It was difficult because as we know, travel and shipping and all those things were interrupted. But I really wanted to do it. And it was extremely difficult. So obviously starting from a place where you don't have a whole set of money to invest in bottles, because the reality is we don't manufacture bottles in Barbados. I don't even think we manufacture plastic bottles in Barbados. So when I wanted to start this business, it was a long and arduous process of looking at different suppliers and figuring out, okay, who best to buy from, and if this person doesn't have, then what are my backup sources in terms of getting bottles? And at that point in time, getting my bottles from the USA was most pragmatic. So I started getting my bottles from the US, and they were extremely expensive. Not just because not just to buy from the US, but when you factor in things like increasing shipping rates, and at that point in time, I wasn't benefiting from duty-free concessions because they had just started. So it was really, really difficult to get bottles from the USA, not just because of COVID, but obviously because of financial constraints. So we know the social distancing and all the policies that would have interrupted not only the transit of the vessels, but the actual port operations. We're in customs, were working different hours. Everybody was working different hours. But at the end of it, I knew I had to do it. And I think I got it done. But it was difficult. It was difficult, and but we got it done.
Yes, you spoke of difficulty. Were there any moments where you felt like, this is like the expense, the logistic challenges, this is too much for me and I feel like I would give up? What type of support system did you have in terms of family, in terms of any small business support organizations in Barbados? Can you say a little about that?
Yeah, so when I first started, admittedly, I was all out of pocket. So I used to do photography before, and I had used my savings to buy that first shipment of bottles. A year or so after that, I would have engaged the youth entrepreneurship scheme, and they would have been pivotal in through a technical assistance grant to help me scale up ever so slightly to get a larger amount of bottles. But what I found to be the most challenging thing was the delay, the time it actually takes to get a shipment from the US to Barbados. So the reality is, if you ship something from the US, it is probably going to take about a week to get from Wall State to Miami. And then from there, it has to align with the time that the boats travel. So I think the shipping company or the boats that come from Miami, I think they come, I think every Friday or something like that. So imagine if I purchase bottles on Friday one week, they don't get there to Friday the next week, and then we have to wait until Friday the next week for them to ship to Barbados. So I think the biggest hurdle there that was created was time. And obviously when you couple that with the financial constraints, it also meant that the product was not on shelves in the frequency that it should have been. Just waiting for bottles and not trying to overexpense myself. But once I had engaged with the youth entrepreneurship scheme, that really, really helped. I think they were able to cover like a shipment of bottles, and I was able to buffer having to spend my more money. Um, Also now working with a higher quantity of bottles. A couple years after that, I had also engaged with Access, who I think is even more pivotal to Carringtons Rum Cream, through technical assistance, through lending, and they have been extremely important in getting my bottles, not only from the US, but we now get them from China. I
Wow.
A company called Vetpin. They now source my bottles from China. And it has been magnificent in terms of just helping the business's cash flow. Obviously, the difference there is that, again, time is increased, but because you're purchasing out of China now, you are able to buy a lot more for a lot less. So it has been very pivotal in getting the brand out there, getting the product out there, and actually having a consistent supply, and not having bottlenecks, especially at our busier periods, which would be Christmas.
Thank you so much for that, Tyrique, providing valuable insight to some of the challenges you would have had in the startup and the ongoing process of your business. Now we're going to pivot to Blessing. And Blessing, we know that, well, I know personally because I myself own one of your bags and I can speak to the quality and the luxury that it brings to me. And we know that you started off in fashion. You started off with a fashion degree and then you pivoted to making bags and repairing bags. And this sparked seemingly a new passion. At what point did you realize this was a real business and what did it take to start trading your craft seriously?
Hi everyone, thanks again for having me. As you said, I used to make clothing and I left BCC and I needed a job, a full-time job. So I kind of laid on my resume and said I knew how to repair bags and I got that job. And from there, I fell in love with bag making. But slowly, not bag making, but just seeing the construction of the bag because when you're repairing a bag, you're seeing it from the inside out. So that fascinated me. But the pivotal point for me was I was working a 9 to 5 and then I was still trying to sew and make, another income. And I do not operate well when I'm tired, but by the time I get home to do patterns and sewing, I will make a lot of mistakes. And it even got to the point where when someone called me because they wanted something done, it irritated me, which is weird. You're getting customers, you should be happy. So it's at that point I decided to stop sewing. I think it was in 2018. I said I wasn't going to sew for the entire year just to give myself a mental break. And then I really dove into the leatherworking and bag making, but I was just doing it as a creative outlet because I'm not sewing anymore. So I just needed something to make. So I made a bag, I posted it just for fun, and someone said they wanted to buy it. So I was like, you sure? You sure? But it was just after that I just made bags, posted them. But actually, no. I started with leather work first, like little card holders and keychains, and that didn't really pick up, to be quite honest. But then when I went into the actual bags is when things just took off. And that was during COVID as well in 2020.
Wow, so we have two different brands built off of the back of COVID. Now, in terms of sourcing your materials as a producer from a small island, Tyrique would have explained some of the challenges he had. Can you share your experience and explain to us how it affects your pricing and your ability to compete?
Yes. So in terms of the materials, I would say Barbados has a pretty decent variation and options. However, it's very limiting, so it also limits your creativity. But then in terms of hardware and labeling and stuff like that, when I first started in 2020, it was super hard because no one was doing it. I was reaching out to businesses to get tags done, and everybody was giving me the runaround. So I had to bring them in as well. And it was pricey, but I soon learned how to kind of do stuff myself. And then with the evolution to of time, the businesses obviously picked up. So like certain hardware couldn't get on the island 6 years ago, but now it could go into different shops and get them. So at first it was pretty hard, pretty expensive, but I'm happy that the businesses or the suppliers now in Barbados see the need for it and they are moving to suit. Yeah.
So can you tell us like where your external source markets were? Did you go China, the US? Could you give us an idea where you got in that time where you got the materials and products from?
Okay, so I am a crafty person, so I just loved everything handmade and like supporting smaller businesses. So I went to Etsy actually. So for the
Okay.
first like year or two, the people that were printing my tags, one was in the USA and I think the other one was in Belgium. And the timeline was pretty, I mean, it took a month, but I could understand. But yeah, it was other smaller businesses around the world, I just the US and Belgium. And there was another one I can't really remember that I was getting my stuff from.
Okay, thank you for giving us some light on where you went. So we had Tyrique going to the US and China, you going to Belgium and the US as well. Now I'm going to go right back to you, Tyrique, and I'm going to ask you to fast forward for us and know
Mhm.
that your brand is stocked at major retailers and I said at the outset at the departure lounge at the airport. Can you tell us how did you break into major retail and has the presence at the airport, has it been beneficial in terms of opening any doors to export our regional markets?
Yeah, so I mean, to answer that question, I actually want to go back to your previous question, when you spoke about pricing and competitiveness, because I think that's a major part of it. And obviously, we know when you're approaching any big supermarket, especially Massy, you are going up strictly on price more or less because they're not interested in tasting it. Actually, they're just interested in how does it compare in price on the shelf to its competitors. And when you asked that question just now, it sparked something in my head because the reality is Barbados is expensive. Our cost to produce is expensive. Our cost of labor is extremely expensive. And now couple that with having to source your materials on the outside, it makes everything that more expensive. And even when it came to getting the bottles, I remember when I first started, I was probably paying, and this might shock some people, but I was paying. It costed me like $30 to make a single bottle of Carringtons Rum Cream. So we understand um how difficult it was, especially in those earlier days, because by the time you make the bottle, you can probably only mark it up like $2 or $3 for it to be competitive on the shelf. So that's something that we definitely grapple with, especially when we compare ourselves to our regional counterparts. So I last year or year before, I went to Suriname and I went to Guyana. And I can admit that I was a bit naive because I often hear people discuss how pricey things are in Barbados. And I'm just like, like I grew up in a world where things are already expensive. So I'm like, why are people complaining all the time? But then I went to Suriname and I went to Guyana. And I saw bottles of my competitors who would sell on shelves in supermarkets, let's say for about $90 Barbados, selling for 30 something dollars Barbados equivalent in countries like Suriname and Guyana. And it immediately said to me that, especially for small businesses, unless you have scale at the very outset, it is extremely difficult for you to compete on price. And coupling that experience with my experience in business beforehand, I realized that the reality is as a small business, it is almost fatal to attempt to compete on price when you do not have scale. So what happens is when you approach supermarkets and when you approach new buyers, I usually have to give them that value proposition. Why should you buy this? And it goes beyond just saying that you should support local. It goes to actually what makes this product what it is. I remember I had a meeting with the guys at Accra the other day, and they were saying, well, they buy a competitor for this amount. And I said the reality is I cannot compete with that. But what I can compete with is the value that the product provides, is the flavor profile that the value provides. So it almost forces entrepreneurs from the competitive standpoint to actually not compete on price, which I guess makes it a bit harder in terms of telling people, okay, this is where you should buy my product above a regional or international competitor. And I will never forget when I was having a sale in Sky Mall and this guy walked up to me and was like, this buddy sells their rum cream for $30. Where are you selling yours for 50? You're never gonna sell, you're never gonna do this, you're never gonna do that. And years later, here we are, just because it forces you then to underscore and emphasize that value proposition. Yes, we're local, but we're quality. We're only more expensive because of these import-export barriers and the cost of actually importing and the cost of producing and the cost of labor. Using that to pivot into the point about the airport now, the airport has been really instrumental, not just from a sales standpoint, but from getting the product out there standpoint. So it's almost like I guess you would say like quasi exporting because you're not sending product overseas on a pallet in a boat in a container, but people are buying your product every day and they're taking it overseas and they're taking it to their family and they're taking it to their friends. And it has been so instrumental that actually my newest flavor, chocolate butterscotch, was as a result of meeting people at the airport. Because it exposes you to all the business people who you would not see on a day-to-day basis. So for example, this guy, he works at this big flavor company in the US. And we were actually able to partner to get products from the US, still expensive, but again, helping to emphasize that value proposition. And a couple years ago as well, would have met with UWI St. Augustine. They have a cocoa research facility down there, and they would have wanted me to make a cream liqueur using their cocoa that they do at the UWI Research, the Cocoa Research Center. So it has done the airport kiosk has done wonders, not just in terms of sales, but in terms of getting the product out there, touching regional markets, touching international markets. And then what happens is when people come back or when people's friends or family come back, they then take back more for them and take back more for them, whoever it may be. So it has been extremely instrumental for sure.
Thank you so much, Tyrique. Wow. I am very happy to hear about your reach and how far you've been going and all the things that you've been doing in terms of the rum cream. So I'm going to swing back over to Blessing, and you expanded beyond the handbags. You're also offering a service now, and you have the Ayola Sewing Studio. And I want you to tell me how the studio connects to the broader mission, how you see it connecting to the broader mission in terms of the creative economy in Barbados. Does the teaching feel like a part of your trade journey?
Yes. So I see my business honestly as an extension of myself. So naturally, I'm a giving person. I love to see people win. So for me to teach, and one thing that stuck with me when I was, because my mother used to sew as well. So I grew up like threading needles and stuff, like doing hems on the school skirt. And my grandmother showed me, because the day my scissors was dull, and she showed me the glass and how you put the scissors through the glass to sharpen it. And she
Yes.
said, okay, Blessing, I'm going to teach you this because if I don't tell you it, when I die, it dies with me. So that's how I'm going to prolong all of the knowledge. And that really stuck with me. So when people will be messaging me on Instagram, oh, how do you get this done? How do you get that done? I'm not necessarily going to get cute. I'm going to tell you how to get it done. So once I saw that the demand was there, I went ahead and I did it. Someone actually came up and told me that I'm doing myself a disservice because I'm teaching my competitors how to beat me. I was like, yeah, I know what's for me I will get. But Ayola actually means do what makes you happy. So if for someone else they want to sew, and sewing may not always have to be monetized. So you don't always have to make money from it. A lot of people sew just for the fun of it or to sew something for their family or because it's therapeutic. So the fact that I can offer that knowledge to them is great. And it ties right back into what Ayola really is. Um, I consider myself an artist, and the machine is my paintbrush and the leather is my canvas. So it's not just about handbags, it's about art and sharing the art with the world. So that's how it ties back into what Ayola is. So it's not necessarily just handbags, it's more about focusing on art and the technique and the skills that you need to make something from nothing, because it gives me a thrill to see a flat piece of fabric and hours later have a fully functioning three-dimensional piece. I love it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do what you love. I love it. And Tyrique, Blessing would have just shared a part of her story, which I think is personal. You know, she talked about her mother and how her mother would sew, how she would got into hemming and threading needles. Can you share with us like your personal story in terms of the product? I alluded to it in the introduction, but you said you in our conversation you would have said it came off of your grandfather's recipe and it came as a result of your community. Could you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think when I first started Carringtons Rum Cream, it didn't dawn on me the impact it would have, not just on myself, but for the community from which it comes. And for me, and a lot of people, get shocked by this, but I've actually been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've never had a job, like never ever had a job. So by the time I was 13, 14, I was literally doing photography. I was selling clothes. It came to a point where I realized that my heart was no longer in it. And it's not something that I wanted to continue. Especially as I started my law degree at KFL. So at that point in time, when we had all the time on our hands, I said to myself, okay, this is the point in time where I have to make something meaningful, something that I care about, and something that I can actually see myself being properly invested in. And I sat for a couple months and I ruminated and I said, okay, this is what it is. It clicked in my head that, my grandfather used to make this rum cream, albeit not commercially. And my mother used to make it. So I said to my mother, Mommy, teach me how to make my grandfather recipe. I want to make this into something bigger than what it is now. I want to make this into a business. And what happens is that the incentive becomes different. The value communication becomes different because it's no longer an entrepreneurial effort like photography or like selling clothes where you're just interested in the cash collection at the end of it, but it's actually about building a brand and building a legacy and anchoring a business on pillars that are almost unshakable. And doing that through honoring my grandfather is really what Carringtons represent. I didn't start off obviously at 18. I didn't start off with all these grand thoughts. But I knew what I wanted to do. And as I got older and as I matured and as my mind matured, I realized, okay, this is actually what this product represents. This is what this product becomes, and this is the extension of a legacy. This is something that I want to carry with me. When you look at every bottle of Carrington's Rum Cream, you would see a picture of my grandfather on it. Because the reality is it's not just about me, it's about the people. It's about and when I first started, I remember I used to say to myself, I want Carringtons to be part of the culture. The same way how you think about Farmer's Choice when you think about Christmas ham. I want Carringtons to be part of the culture. I want Carringtons to be the go-to whenever people think about cream liqueurs. And that incentive is a bit different than just looking at it from a money perspective. Absolutely. But even more so, let's even think about the name itself. I remember when I first wanted to name it Carringtons, a lot of my friends would say, "Oh no, don't name it Carringtons. Carringtons is not international. It doesn't," because we know that Carrington Village is associated with things that are not the best in terms of crime or violence and all those sorts of things. And I said to myself, absolutely not. I actually have to own this because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show that one, great people come from and have come from Carrington Village, and two, you're not defined by what people think you are. So that when I put together Carrington's Rum Cream and you look at the packaging and it's nice, and you hear the story and it's nice, and you think about the name and it's nice. The sum of all those efforts is what anchors the business. And that's something that I absolutely could not have made it this far if I did not have. And that's just a matter of fact, really.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is true what you said in terms of, having all those factors combined. It really lends to the brand and it helps it to promote itself in a way. So thankful to you for that. And I'm going to swing back over to Blessing now. And I'm going to talk to you because I found out about you through Instagram, through word of mouth, through a colleague. And Instagram, I suppose, is one of those platforms where you get to interact with not only local persons, but regional persons. But here in the region, we have a lot of challenges as it relates to apps and having accessibility to use the app for all the features that it has, because Instagram live shopping is not available in our region. It's not something that our entrepreneurs have access to. So can you tell us how you use the platform as an actual trade and sales channel despite these limitations? And then can you explain to us what the gap costs a handmade product, a high touch product like yours, how it differs in terms of when you're looking at all the other products out there on social media or out there in the electronic sphere?
Okay, so the second question answers the first. So because we are so limited and restricted, I don't view Instagram as other people would. So I don't necessarily use it to market my business, not to market my business, but to get direct sales. What I do instead is I use it to be transparent and to build that relationship with the audience. If you check on my Ayola page, there aren't any professional photo shoots. Everything is like low effort, like I'm chilling talking to you. And I found that has worked because there are so many different businesses out there, as you just said. What makes mine different is because when you come to Ayola, when you get an Ayola bag, you know where it's made, you know who made it. And that will set me apart instantly instead of you just getting something that was made, you don't even know where it's made. So I don't necessarily use the restrictions. Yes, they are sad that we can't really get access to those things. But as with everything in Barbados, when you can't work with it, when it's working against you, you have to work with it. So with the materials, right back down to the apps. So yeah, for me, that's what I do. And even in terms of getting a website was difficult. Not setting it up, but going through the whole payment platforms and trying to do everything online. We don't really have that many options here in Barbados. So it was a challenge, but thankfully I was able to maneuver through it. But yeah, I just try to adapt to my situation and look and see what is best for me, because the traditional route that someone else may take, like Tyrique's route, is not my route. I can't scale, I can't compete on pricing. Even with value, my value is that you're getting a quality product and you know who's making it. That's my value. And you get to customize it as well. So it's finding your path and then just going there.
Okay. You spoke just now about, some of the challenges in terms of the website development and such. Like, are there any entities in Barbados where you sought training for like managing like your digital, like the videos you make? Is it all self-taught, or do you have you had formal training in it? Do you, go on YouTube to see, how to do it, or is this something that is organic and naturally evolves?
Well, I love learning new stuff. So the tech part, I don't consider myself a technical person.
Okay.
So the first website was atrocious. I actually did it on my iPad because I didn't have a laptop at the time, and it was terrible. I just went through and I looked up, as I said, Google, YouTube, and I learned myself. In terms of videos and editing, I fell in love with it at first. I don't do it as much now, but it's another creative way to showcase yourself. But yeah, I learned everything myself. And I'm glad that I did too, because to hire someone is great, but unless you know how it works on the back end, you don't really know what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. So I'm still glad that I know on the back end how it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like. It may not be 100% professional, but it is efficient.
Wonderful. Self-thought, self-made. Wonderful. Now, Tyrique, I'm going to come right back over to you. We talked about, the role of technology with Ayola just now, and I just want to get an idea of behind the scenes, in terms of you. We know you're on the shelves, but we also know as well that you're online and you have a website as well. I know you're engaging on WhatsApp. I see your posts, and as well as on social media, you do a lot of self-promotion and such like. So can you give me an idea how digital trade has played in terms of your growth, and for you, what has worked best? What communication technology has worked best in terms of, do you find your website works better? Do you find social media? Just explain to us, how that works for you.
Yeah, so for me, this is an interesting question, and it's interesting because we often would like to think that we are progressing as a society, but in certain things we are, and in certain things we're not. So I remember when the pandemic first hit, obviously we had no choice but to sell online. So I first started, like when I very first started, I just used to take orders via DM. And then I graduated to a Google form. And then I graduated to a selling platform type of website, not like a full domain name website, but just a platform to sell on. And that was 2020, 2021. After 2021, going to 2022, we were slowly but surely getting back out into in-person activities, and social distancing requirements were being slowly but surely pulled back. And then it was almost as if Bajans didn't care to shop online anymore. So all of the effort that we put into developing these online platforms and making sure that people have our goods accessible, Bajans went back to the traditional system. Bajans were not interested in purchasing anymore, purchasing online anymore. And I realized that most distinctly when I remember I had one Christmas, 2021's Christmas was better than 2022's Christmas. And I said to myself, there's absolutely no way that this can make sense, because why is it that the business is growing on, well, month to month, but in our highest period, we've seen like a 50% decline in our sales. And then I realized that people are actually no longer interested in going to online websites, um, shopping online, doing any of that. People literally went back to the supermarkets. Um, And I actually even realized that further when I had my Sky Mall kiosk, because I had that for like a couple months, and then I had no choice but to pivot to the supermarkets because I realized as much as Bajans want innovation, as much as Bajans want to feel like if they're walking into the future, their habits say something else. So I had to revert to that traditional way of selling, be it on the shelves, be it at supermarkets, pop-up shops like Girlfriends Expo and Cloth, were also pivotal. But I would say, especially because I think a big part of it is the maturity of the alcoholic industry. People have consumed alcohol and have purchased alcohol in a certain way for a very long time. And while it may work for other products, for example, like the handbags, people were not interested in purchasing alcohol online anymore. People want to see it on the shelf because it then layers that legitimacy of, okay, this has to be a quality product because it is at the shelf pharmacy, it is on the shelf at Popular or Price Smart or wherever it may be. So that is basically in some way experience with technology. In terms of marketing, again, I think on not let me not say unfortunately, but because the product is new in an industry that is so mature, you almost have to play by the rules a little bit because when you're a bit too disruptive, it can work against your brand. So even when it comes to my online marketing, I don't really, well, particularly for Carringtons, I don't really do a lot of like personal videos or a lot of like TikTok style content or like Instagram reels or short or YouTube. I don't do a lot of that because people actually want to see the product in use. People want to see content and images that actually speak to the quality of the product and speak to how people consume alcohol. So in circumstances where other businesses might be able to get away with, hopping on every TikTok trend and making funny videos, Carringtons is not a business that stands to benefit from that style of marketing. Just because of what the industry demands. It demands a certain level of seriousness. It demands a certain level of quality assurance that cannot be communicated through things like doing TikTok trends. So it makes it easier on me because I spend I spend a bit less, sorry, on editing videos and stressing about hopping on the next trend because people just want to see the cream liqueur being used in a nice inviting setting. And once that's backed up with the quality on the shelf, then we're good to go. Since then, I find that moving away from technology and again going back to that traditional experience which Bajans think that they don't like. Sampling, actually supermarket sampling has been the driving force behind getting my product moving off of shelves. Because what happens is a lot of people will come and say, yeah, I've seen it online, but the online presence, even though it's growing, it hasn't done much to convert that into sales, particularly outside of our busy period, which is Christmas. So a lot of people will come and say, I've seen it online, I've been waiting to try it. And that has now made sampling our go-to for getting the product out there, even more so than social media.
Okay, thank you so much, Tyrique. And Blessing would have said, everybody's journey is not linear, everybody's path is not linear. So, it's good that you've recognized that your path is not necessarily doing all the TikToks and all the shorts and stuff, but your path is really curating a experience where there is a smoothness to the promotion of your product. And I thank you for sharing that as well. Now, I want to bring you both together for a couple of questions that I think will resonate with everyone who's watching, especially those who are thinking about starting a business, starting their entrepreneurial journey. And I'm going to start with Blessing. What do you think is the single biggest barrier that is stopping youth-owned businesses like yours or like Tyrique's from trading more freely within CARICOM? What comes to your mind when you think of this question? What do you think are the barriers for getting your product beyond the shores of Barbados within the region or even internationally?
I would say one of them is internally, so not having the confidence or thinking that you don't know how to do it. For me personally, with bags, I could just ship stuff, but when you're dealing with food, you have certain specifications. So not knowing that, and then also we don't learn entrepreneurship in school unless you went to business school. We don't learn it. So yes, there are entities out there to help and to teach, But if you don't know, you don't know. So a lot of youth out there don't know where to go to even get the help, or where to look to find the different specifications. So I would say that that is the main barrier, because if you're starting small, it's not hard to ship and to get other people your stuff. But it's when you don't know what to do, and then also thinking that you have to be absolutely perfect, that's another barrier, because they don't start until they feel like everything is perfect. Nothing will be perfect, and you will learn as you grow. As I said, I can only speak for things like handbags or accessories. I know with food, that's a completely different conversation, or hair products, anything that requires testing. But I would say just knowing where to go, who to go to, yeah, to me, that's the main barrier. Coming from someone who didn't do any business courses, I didn't do principles of accounts, none of that. So to me, just the knowledge in general is the biggest barrier. And I just wanted to quickly touch on what Tyrique said. He said that Bajans were digressing really because they were moving offline. It's not just Bajans, it's around the world. There was a lot of data to show that after COVID, there was a huge decline in online businesses, and that's where you see a lot of businesses doing pop-ups and having physical stores now. Because I had the same issue right after COVID, things just went downhill. And then I realized people don't want to be online anymore because I guess because of COVID and having to stay inside, they now desire physical presence of things. So it's not just the Bajans, it's everyone around the world that had the same idea.
I can attest to that. I one that was worn out by even online discussions after a while, you feel like you need to get in person and be face to face and interact. So I can relate with that. Now, Tyrique, I want to get your perspective on my question that I posed in terms of what are the barriers you feel that are hindering or stopping youth-led businesses like yours from, trading more freely within CARICOM, getting outside of Barbados, or even for a matter of fact, like establishing themselves inside of Barbados.
Yeah, so for me, I guess I can start regionally. Um, I'm speaking specifically from the food and beverage sector. I think I have to circle back to my previous point, which talks about the cost of goods, how much it actually costs to produce in Barbados. I think that that's the single most prohibitive barrier in getting our products out there. And I see a question in the chat asking about sourcing products regionally, not just from places like the US and China. But the reality is that by the time they get here, the price that you pay to get them here is still quite burdensome. So I remember I was trying to get a small shipment from like 6 bottles from here to Guyana on a plane. And the cost of like 400 Barbados dollars just to ship 6 bottles. And that's by plane. But also, we can actually use that now to segue into a different point I didn't plan to talk about. But actual shipping links in this country. So, for example, our shipments, let's say to Guyana, from what I've been told from the shipping companies, we only have a boat to and from Guyana every 6 weeks. 6 weeks is a very, very long time in business. So how are businesses supposed to trade meaningfully if we have not developed the shipping links to our CARICOM neighbors? And coupling that now with the high cost of goods to produce in Barbados, by the time you get down there, you are far, far, far above the local competition. And the reality is this, it costs a lot less to produce in our CARICOM, in other CARICOM countries. And if you're exporting a product to their countries, they're not going to be invested in it in the way that they are, or in the way that a Bajan would be in a local product, because they don't have that connection to it. They don't have that interest in it because it is a foreign product that's on our shelves and is extremely expensive. So that's true. That's the shipping links, and that's the cost of goods. What I also think that we need to do is we actually need to develop more meaningful relationships, not just at the policy level, not just at the level of government, but between businesses between businesses across countries. So I currently produce at the Food Science Center, which is a shared production facility in Newton by Export Barbados, and it's done an excellent job in creating a space for small businesses like me to produce in a HACCP ready, a HACCP compliant rather environment, and that's ready for export. But what happens when you have memoranda of understandings and you have all of these big agreements and all these treaties, but you are not connecting your producers to buyers? And it really opened my eyes when I went to Guyana on a trade mission with Export Barbados. And I realized this. You can have the best product, you can have a fancy product, you can have a nice product, but at the end of it, if we reduce it down to what it actually is, we need people to buy. We need people who are interested in buying. So, for example, how about we explore connecting producers in Barbados with buyers in Guyana? Can we connect Carringtons Rum Cream with Massey distribution in Guyana or Massey in Jamaica? So those are the things that we have to begin to think about, because we've gone half of the way in terms of trying to upskill our producers, but who are we getting to buy these products? That is the question. And I actually also want to follow on from the point that was previously mentioned about young people not knowing where to go, because I think that's something that, the point about confidence, and I think that's a really big part of it. A lot of young people, we need to exercise that intellectual curiosity. Much like Blessing, I studied law, so I have no experience studying marketing or business or anything like that. But by being invested in my business, always wanting or always asking the question why, it has gone a long way in actually, upskilling me in my business, because I know a bit more au fait with the marketing terms and marketing ploys, and the different ways of how to do business, how to handle different contractual arrangements, and how to handle different business relationships. So to add to her point, is absolutely correct. Young people need more intellectual curiosity. Don't be afraid to ask why. Don't be afraid to, go to somebody who has walked the walk and not just taught the talk, and say to them, okay, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think about this? I find a lot of the times young people like to sit down and think in a vacuum, and it restricts growth in ways that honestly cannot even be imagined. And because if you don't know, there are resources out there that you can exploit, but you have to begin thinking about, okay, what does my business need? Who can I get it from? I find a lot of people just like to say, okay, well, it's not out there, or I don't know where it is. I don't know anything about it. So that's the enemy in that. But Blessing would not able to have made it this far without that intellectual curiosity. Neither would I. There are a lot of resources out there that are underutilized because a lot of young people just resort to, oh, I don't know, it's not for me, or I don't know what it is, or I don't know if there's anything out there for me. So just to add to Blessing's point, that intellectual curiosity is most definitely a barrier, perhaps not to trade, but to just the development of business in general. So just to recap those points, the shipping links, very big barrier. Cost of goods, very big barrier. And actually connecting meaningfully beyond policy frameworks, beyond treaty agreements, to people who are actually willing, able, and capable to continually supply your product in whatever jurisdiction you're looking to get it. And just to underscore that point briefly, it just came back to my head. I remember I went to Jamaica in April. I was shocked to see that I couldn't even find Monkey on the shelves in Jamaica. We know Monkey is massive. Monkey is the one that started it all. And it immediately underscored once again that people are less willing to buy from us just because we are more expensive straight off the bat. Same thing with Guyana and Suriname. You hardly find products apart from, I guess, Pine Hill and Wabisco. We know Wabisco and Pine Hill are multinational now, because they have foreign owners. So, yeah.
Thank you so very much for that, Tyrique. Some very, very interesting insights, especially as it relates to the, intellectual curiosity. I really like that. And from Blessing, what stood out to me as well. And I also see a comment in the chat on that is, really starting to build that entrepreneurial mindset from young. So when we have children in primary schools, get yes in there, get yes having active programs similar to the ones they have in secondary school, because as from there you can really grow it and build it out, and you could instill those principles. It may not be at the same level at secondary schools, but yeah, you would have those principles being there, and you will have students actually, interested and invested in not just going to work for someone, but work for themselves, and in turn contribute to our economic development. Now, I'm going to ask the final question. I'm going to ask this question before I go to any questions from anyone who's on the call. And I want you, both you and Blessing, to give me one piece of advice you would give to a young Barbadian entrepreneur who is basically ready to take their product beyond the local market for the first time. Somebody who is looking to go outside, somebody who's looking to build up their brand. And even if it's not outside the local market, is like getting that reach, getting, the customers, getting that base, getting a clientele. What's one piece of advice you would give to them? And I'm going to stay with you, Tyrique, and let you lead the way on this one.
Yeah, so for me, I think slow but steady wins the race. I know some businesses may not be able to benefit from that type of approach. But for me, particularly in Rum Cream, I would say slow and steady wins the race. So for example, people always say, and they make it sound easy, yeah, you should get your product out there, you should export, you should go to here, you should go there, you should go everywhere. But from a strategic standpoint, I always said to myself, the product has to be absolutely perfect in Barbados before I can even venture to take it overseas. And I think taking that step back and saying, okay, I have to try my best to exhaust the product in Barbados. And that doesn't mean put out all the flavors in the world, but actually making sure that the product is ready for export. And the only way you can do that is through solidifying it in Barbados. Because the reality is, how do you export a product to another country that is otherwise not known in the country that you live in? So for me, it has always been a case of I actually want to get it right in Barbados first. And once I get it right in Barbados, then I would feel more comfortable taking it somewhere else. And I would have done that. So in 2024, that's when I went to Guyana for the first time. And by that time, Carringtons was slowly but surely, getting up and up and up and up. And by that time, I felt comfortable enough to send a shipment to Guyana, set up shop and sell it. And thank God, the Guyanese fell in love with it. But it said to me that those years of refining the recipe and making it shelf stable and making it ready for export paid off in the end. Because if I had attempted to do that in the earlier years, it would have probably been a disaster for the business in terms of a quality standpoint. Because obviously now, especially producing at the food science center, you are able to work with people like food scientists. You're able to work with people, get feedback from people who actually work in the food and beverage industry, taking it outside of the household, taking it outside of the family. So for me, my biggest lesson is slow and steady wins the race. Get it right first in Barbados, then look to export because you do not want to export something that you have to recall. It is going to be worse than not exporting at all.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyrique. I'm going to pivot over to Blessing and ask for your advice that you would give to any young entrepreneur who's looking to get into the race.
Honestly, the same as that advice. Master home first, and then you could shift overseas. But I would also say don't underestimate the power of Barbadians because we tend to think that we need that international market. We absolutely don't. For the 7 years that I've been in business, I would say 5% is international, the rest are locals. So don't underestimate the power that is in Barbados. That's one. Two, get to know your business because not every business is going to scale the same. So maybe Tyrique could scale in 3 years and go internationally. For me, I may not even have to scale. My scale will be differently, and I'll figure that out too. I try scaling the traditional way is not for me. It's not part of my business model. So I would say get to know your business first. It's going to take a lot of time and be open to the criticism, to be quite honest. Yes, everybody will not be coming from a genuinely good place, but listen to the critiques and go back and refine and refine and refine as much as you have to because things will never be perfect. There'll always be room for improvement. And yeah, believe in yourself pretty much because once you believe in yourself, no one can stop you. And about the intellectual curiosity, if you don't know where to start, just start watching Shark Tank because the jargon they use, you'll be all Google it. What does this mean? What I mean? That's where I learned a lot of stuff from. So just watch Shark Tank and you will get a start on like what to even research. But yeah, start small. I don't want to say perfect your product, but master home. Make sure when agents hear about your business or when they review your product, they have nothing but good things to say. And then if you have to think about international markets, because out there, we think Bajans are bad, out there are a pack of wolves and they will rip you to shreds. So make sure everything is good first before you even think about wanting to export.
Thank you so very much for that, Blessing. And especially, I see that there is alignment in terms of, slow and steady, and really believing in yourself. And I feel like that is something that we too can, from a young age, harness in our young ones and build them up to be, confident. I can do this persons. So I'm going to use the last couple remaining minutes to go to the Q&A section. And already we have questions in the chat. So I'm going to start by reading a question from Renee P. And she said, you both mentioned technical assistance as being crucial. What types of technical assistance would you see as useful, and what is in your view currently lacking? So I guess she is speaking about, Tyrique mentioned Fund Access, and he mentioned Yes the Yes program. So she really wants to get your perspective on, the assistance in terms of getting your business to where it needs to be. So if I could just get your views on that.
Yeah, so for me, it's actually a point that I wanted to highlight before when we were talking about actually educating people on entrepreneurship. And I think one of the frustrating elements about working with any developmental agency in Barbados is that we try to wholesale entrepreneurship to young people. It is something that I think is going to do more harm than good. So I remember when I was in primary school, the thing was to work hard, get a good education, and go get a job. Now it has almost flipped, right? And we know a lot of young people face underemployment and unemployment because we've upskilled them, but our market hasn't expanded to accommodate them. And I fear that that is beginning to happen with entrepreneurship to the extent that we feel now, okay, everybody needs to have a business and everybody needs to be self-employed, even if not as their main source, but as an additional source of income, which is perfectly fine. But what happens is when we try to sell the same dream to everybody, we begin to see the quality reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce. And if we can just pivot away from Carringtons into my new business, I recently started a car wash, and that is the narrative that I'm trying to upend now because we have a lot of people who are just doing things for the money, and it has given people a lot lower expectations of what should come from a certain business and what should come from entrepreneurs and what should we expect from our business people. And it's something that I just wanted to begin with, just to say that that's an important caveat. Apart from that, I also think that getting technical assistance, and I understand that these entities have to manage their risk. Let me first say that. But unfortunately, sometimes it feels like we are being judged by a measuring stick that is not meant for entrepreneurs. So, for example, you have a lot of people who may be employed at these places who have never owned a business, never ran a business, never partook at a high level in business. And what happens is it becomes daunting to young people. And I will never forget when I first went to the Youth for Entrepreneurship scheme, and I want to say that I have a good relationship with them now. This is just when we first started. And I sat down with who was then my business development officer. And I had sat down with her after sending a nice long proposal about Carringtons and the history behind it. And the first thing she looked at me and said, she was like, cut the fluff. Tell me what you really hear. And that sort of approach is scary to young people. Because we have people who are not otherwise equipped to advise on business, the ones being the judge and the jury on what type of technical assistance you should get, the extent of technical assistance that you should get. And I can understand how it might be scary to young people. So to answer the question more specifically, what I would say is yes, we have provisions there in terms of funding, but how do we then buttress that with adequate education, adequate service, so that when young people seek help from these institutions, it doesn't feel like a constant uphill battle. Understanding, of course, that these institutions do have to mitigate their own risk.
What say you, Blessing? What do you have to add on the technical assistance question?
I would actually agree with Tyrique because I had that issue when I was first starting out. The funding is there, all the free seminars are there. But even if you give me $1,000 or even $1,000,000 back then, I don't know what to do with it. And then the people that telling me what to do with it, as you said, don't run small businesses, or they think that it's just one straight path. So it's a very hard thing to like really answer because I think each business has its own uniqueness and individuality about it. So one set of advice can't do for everybody. So I think it will be better if we could also, if we, along with the funding, provide mentorship. A mentorship with someone who is in your field. So if I make handbags, don't let someone who is doing food and beverages mentor me. It's a waste of time. So I just think getting the right alignment and knowing that it's not just about, it's about the money, but the money is the last part. You got to go down a whole road to get to the money. And that is really going to, who's the word? It's going to add to the longevity of the business, is what I'm trying to say. So the money is the last part, but building up the brand is what you really need to do, and you need the right advice to know how to do it.
If I can just add to that, sorry for interjecting, because I see a lot of comments about the mentorship. What Blessing is saying is absolutely correct. I think the reality is just again to underscore that point. The biggest lessons I've learned have been from people who have actually walked the walk and not just taught the talk. Unfortunately, a lot of these organizations, developmental organizations, are equipped with people who can only speak from the context of a textbook. And it does more harm than good, especially for small businesses, because again, to Blessing's point and to my previous point, we're trying to wholesale entrepreneurship. So you would tell a young person that differentiate your business based on what you offer, which I guess is standard. But what happens when you are trying to penetrate a market that is saturated? How do you then use or level the intangibles to create a business that is actually differentiated beyond the product? Because there's only so many different ways you can do nails. There's only so many different ways you can do hair at a level that is sustainable and scalable. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to what Blessing was saying.
Thank you very much for that, Tyrique. And we are going to head on over to the chat again. So we have Theodore Fraser, and he is congratulating you both and he says you clearly understand your brands, you know how to appeal to them and to reach your markets. And he's especially shouting out Tyrique, who recently opened. He's putting a plug here for your new business where his office is located. And he says, he sees you as a very humble and professional young man, and he is very proud to see you doing good things as a youth. And his question for both of you is, what is the vision for your respective brands, and what is perhaps one thing you would need to realize your vision to get to your end goal? And I guess we could start with Blessing on this one.
Yeah, so my vision is not the traditional route, as I just said. So the first thing you need to do is understand that that what has been done traditionally does not have to be your path. So you really have to sit down with yourself and know what you want to do. And for me, the path for my business, as I said, is not scaling, is providing value in knowledge and in good products. So the way that I would scale is providing even more value. Of course, it has to come down to the money. If I'm providing more value, I could charge more money, but that doesn't mean that I have to have a whole factory or have a team producing 100 bags every week. And that is the road that I was chasing for a couple of years. It was only like last year, early this year, when I realized that that wasn't the road for me, especially to looking at the resources here in Barbados. I can't honestly bring in all of my materials. I could bring in some. So it was just playing the different factors into what you want and also what you want out of your business. If you want it to be a multi-million business, if you want an exit to your business, or if you want something that you are actually doing, it makes you happy and you're happy with that. Because I hear a lot of gurus saying that if you walk away from your business for 2 weeks, you don't have a business, you just have created yourself a job. And that stayed in my mind for many years. And I was like, oh no, I just have a job, I don't have a business. But the reality is, even if you're the CEO of another business, if you walk away for 2 weeks, you still don't have your job. So we put this thing in our head that, oh my gosh, it has to be this big business. But at the end of the day, all of us are just here working to get money, which is all jobs. So it's okay if you just have a job. And the data actually shows from last year in America that the quickest growing businesses are the ones that are run solo. So they don't have a team, they don't have anything, and they're actually generating the most profits. Because when you're scaling, is more money, more overhead. So again, you have to think about what you want for your business and the vision that you want for the years to come. So that would determine which path you are actually going to take.
Thank you so very much for that, Blessing and Tyrique. And I think we would have tackled the question on mentoring. There is somebody who is agreeing with you in terms of intellectual curiosity, and they note that is very important, and they, highlight asking strategic questions and asking relevant experience questions. This is going back to what you guys were talking about in terms of being paired with persons who are in your industry, especially for Blessing. And we have also um, this is more of a comment in the chat, and this is from Edmund, and he is really liking your insights, and he is bringing to your attention the fact that there is a WTO Young Trade Leaders program that he believes that you both could benefit from. And he is saying that the deadline has passed, but he was also asking you to, get in contact with Caribbean Export Development Agency. They are actually one of our partners here, and there's a strong interest from that institution in terms of, helping businesses get their products to the international market. So that is a good institution that you guys can look to. And he wishes you all the best, and he will definitely, look out for your products. And we also have Marilyn, who is also noting that you could, she mentioned earlier the idea of a youth entrepreneurship group, which she thinks can provide, mentoring to like-minded entrepreneurs, even though you might not be in the same business. I guess this, I'm just, adding to what she's saying. Even though you might not be in the same business, you will still have, the opportunity to link with persons who are young, to share your experiences, to learn from one another, to encourage one another, to build mentorship, because you never know, you could encourage somebody to, get into bags, and you could form alliances. So we have a lot of good feedback and a good comments and a good observations in the chat. And we have one hand, well, this is Blessing's hand that is raised. So we'll come to you, Blessing, so that you could you can make your final comments, your final thoughts on this, and then we'll move to Tyrique. And since I see no other hands or questions, we'll close after that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on the point about the groups. We can get ahead so much easier if we work together. I think everyone wants to be, this is my business, I want to do it by myself. You can't get there by yourself. You have to collab with somebody to get ahead. So even with fashion, I just did a project where we were with other designers and we did a collection. So instead of trying to do everything yourself, look for like-minded people and make it a group effort, because everybody doesn't have to be a business owner because all the great businesses need employees anyways. So yeah, those are my closing thoughts.
We'll move to you now, Tyrique, to have your final closing thoughts.
Yeah, so for me, I just want to say thank you again for having me. I was really, really appreciative. And just to pivot off of Blessing's point, I think that that's very important. Of course, I'm going to come with a caveat, and that is what I find before you help somebody, I think you also have to be in a position to help yourself. And sometimes what happens is, and that's not to say that there are not any groups in Barbados where you, like-minded people come together. But what happens is, the reality is this: one, two, or three people out of that group have to be able to have access to the resources to actually help up the group. I find from my experience, it's very difficult when you have a group of people who are, I guess you could say, equally yoked, but not in the way that could actually help to uplift one another. So what happens is, yes, you come together and you have brilliant ideas, but when it comes to actioning those ideas, if nobody has the wherewithal or the connections or the resources to actually move these ideas into reality, then they just become think tanks. And I think that's what happens in Barbados a lot. And that's mainly because our starting point is not collaboration. We want to collaborate at the point where our ideas or where we think our ideas are fully formed. So then you have clashes and you have competing ideas and people that don't want to work with each other. And then just in the end, people who actually are not in a position to help each other. So I think, I mean, I don't want to reduce it, but to just to that point in particular, we have to be able to bring tools to the table to help one another. And obviously, given our history is a bit difficult as Black people. But yeah, to your point, absolutely. We see other people from other factions of society work together, and they come together brilliantly. When it came to starting this business, I actually worked a lot with the Muslim community, and seeing them, well, not Carringtons, the new car wash business, and just seeing how they come together, how they help one another, how they build together, not only for themselves but for people outside. That's something that I think we could definitely benefit from going forward, especially as young people. Come together, but come together in a way that allows you to actually help each other up. If two of us are trying to get on top of a wall, one body might have to go out to pull you up. We both can't get on the wall at the same time. So that's just what I wanted to add to that point.
Thank you so very much. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time. We've actually gone past it, but I hope that this conversation has been beneficial to young entrepreneurs on the call, young entrepreneurs who will, watch the recording in the future. And what it has shown for me is that, the trade landscape in terms of youth and youth entrepreneurship. If we have persons like Blessing and Tyrique out there, we have persons who are taking the mantle and they understand the seriousness of it. We also would have seen that, in terms of the challenges that they would have highlighted that that they could face, they did not view them as stopping points, but they highlighted the real possibilities that exist out there for entrepreneurs, if they have the right support, if they have that technical assistance, if they have being yoked with equally minded persons, if they have the access to logistic channels that are easier so they can get their goods and their products to have their products out there rather. So I think today was a very fruitful conversation, and I trust that the audience would have enjoyed it. And again, I just want to thank Blessing and Tyrique for not only being so open and generous with your experiences, but as well as your time, because I know that time is money and you are entrepreneurs and you have your businesses to run. So from the staff at the SRC, we just really want to thank you for coming out. We also want to thank our team for working behind the scenes to make everything possible today. And I want to invite you to follow Tyrique and Blessing's journey. So Tyrique's website is drinkcarringtons.company.site. That's drinkcarringtons.company.site. And Blessing's brand is on Instagram, and it is at Ayola, AYOLA _ the brand. and that is her page on Instagram. So on behalf of the SRC, I want to reiterate and thank you for joining us, and we assure you that highlights from today's session will be carried across our digital platforms. And I want to end off by wishing you a wonderful MSME Day and extend MSME greetings to all business owners out there who are like Tyrique and Blessing, helping to really build up economies out there. And that is it from me, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.